Hey everyone, my name is David Leonard. This is my first YouTube video. I'm just kind of diving into it here, but I wanted to start with a pretty simple topic. I'm also using this video for audio and video tests, just making sure everything seems to be set up well. So what we're going over today is pretty simple. It's just the Windows Subsystem for Linux. Got introduced recently with Windows 10. It is really slick because what it allows you to do is use some native Linux commands right on the Windows kernel without the need for a virtual machine. That's really awesome for low power machines, which I know a lot of people use. You know, something with like 4 gigs of RAM, or even less than that. You know, Windows Subsystem for Linux is going to be a great advantage for you. So we're going to dive into the screen record and show you how to set it up. All right, there are 2 steps to getting Windows Subsystem for Linux up and rolling on your system. We're going to install Windows Subsystem for Linux, the feature set, inside of Windows. Then we're going to go to the Windows Store and install some version of Linux that we want to use, like Ubuntu or CentOS. So to get started, we're going to open the Settings panel. We're going to go to Apps, and we're going to go to Programs and Features. Then we're going to go to Turn Windows Features on or off. That's going to bring up this little dialog window here. And inside of this little dialog window, there are a bunch of features. Some of them are going to be on, some are going to be off. We're going to scroll all the way bottom here, and we're just going to check on Windows Subsystem for Linux. You're going to hit OK. And it's going to go ahead and download and apply all the changes that it needs to. It's also going to need to restart your system. You need to go ahead and complete this process now before we can dive into the store. I'm going to restart really quick, and we'll be right back. Alright, and I'm back from my restart. It took my system about 5 minutes to apply those changes, and it looked a lot like applying a Windows update. So, now that we're here and we've got the Windows Subsystem for Linux feature enabled, we can go ahead and install a version of Linux from the Microsoft Store. There is no other way currently to interact with Windows Subsystem for Linux. You do have to pick these up from the store, but luckily you don't have to be signed into the store to be able to download these. So when you open the store, you're just going to come up to your standard Microsoft Store, and you're going to go ahead and search for the Linux version of your choice. In our case, we're going to use Ubuntu. It's a good place to get started, and you'll see here it kind of starts off with a couple different options. I do prefer using an LTS or long-term support option. The Ubuntu version without a version on it is typically the latest version. Sticking with an LTS version, it's going to give you a lot more stability, and if there are breaking changes, you won't be as affected in an LTS version. So we can come in here to the LTS version, and all we have to do is come up here and hit Get, and it's going to ask us if we want to sign in, and we can just say no, and it's going to start downloading. Once Ubuntu is finished installing, you can go ahead and just hit Launch, and we can dive directly into Ubuntu. All right, so when you first hit launch for the first time, it is going to run through a couple features here. It's going to install Ubuntu into your system, just kind of get some stuff set up and get the mounts working. And it's also going to, in a minute, ask us to go ahead and set up a user and a couple other things. Once Ubuntu has finished installing, it's going to prompt you to create a default Unix user account. This account doesn't need to match your Windows username and is what you'll use inside the system. So typically I use the username David. The reason why is a lot of systems that I log into use that username. You should pick whatever systems you use most often, and you should try to keep it common. So if you're using a system and there's a requirement of using like first name dot last name, I do recommend doing that here. There are ways to get around those types of remote system engagements with SSH configs, but it's a little bit easier if you don't have to handle that. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my Unix username here. And it's also going to have you enter a password. Again, this is not your Windows password. This is just a completely unique password. It's going to have you confirm that password. And then it's going to drop you directly into Ubuntu running on your Windows machine. So we can come in here and we could start running, very typical Linux commands. We could do things like dig, google.com, and it's all going to start working here. Dig is a great tool for looking up DNS entries. We can ping google.com. That's a typical, Windows utility also, but it also works here under Linux and is the Linux version of that. And there's so much more we can do here. We can do a curl on google.com, and it's going to do all the work. And as you can see here, we've got the 301 moved because we're pulling the HTTPS version. So we can go ahead and pull that. and we'll see that it works fine. You got to not have 4 W's. So if we do that, we pull the actual Google page here really simply. We can even do things like verbose. It's all working. It's super, super fast and should offer a lot of value for you. And that's a basic introduction to Windows Subsystem for Linux. There's not a lot going on there. We didn't get into too much. There's a ton inside of this platform, but it should get you started and give you an awesome opportunity to play around with Linux on your Windows machine without needing to set up a virtual machine or other much more complex systems. Windows Subsystem for Linux is designed to be a very entry-level way to get access to Linux and also to be able to use a lot of the Linux utilities that Microsoft has been building recently. Thanks for joining me here in this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and this was also a great AV test for me. Please let me know what you think of the quality, and let me know if there are any concerns that you have, and I'll see you in the next video.